Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Ireland once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel once before. So the last beer that I tried from these guys was very nice. I had heard prior to that these guys were doing some really good stuff, so that beer really lived up to the expectations I had for it. And the one that we're going to have a look at today is a similar style. It goes up the alcohol scale a little bit though, so I do have to say I'm quite curious to see how this one turns out, but at the same time I do have quite high expectations for it based on the last one, so we'll just need to see how we got on then. But hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head to Belfast in Northern Ireland, and we're going to have a look at my second beer from Bullhouse Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Big Axe. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this one is a double IPA. Now, I'm not 100% sure whether we can consider this one to be a New England double IPA, because in the ingredients list it only lists oats and barley malt. There's no wheat mentioned there, but we'll just need to see how we get on with it. But regardless, knowing Bullhouse Brewing Company, this will be quite a nice beer. It does seem to be highly rated, so we'll just crack on and see how we go. It's always nice to review some Irish beers for you here on the channel. The last one that we reviewed from these guys, of course, was the Frank the Tank New England Paleo, and that was pretty damn good actually. But since this is an Irish review, we do have a few shout outs that we need to do in this one. First and foremost to Paul Rogers of Dalriada Imports. It's thanks to him that you guys are getting to enjoy this Irish mini series of beers that we're doing here on the channel. He's been running his Irish import company to Scotland for quite a number of years now, and he's starting to expand down into England. So if you are a stockist of craft beer and you're interested in some Irish stuff, Paul is the man that you want to talk to. So there you've got his contact details. Get in touch with him. But again, thank you to Paul for making this and the other Irish reviews possible here. A shout out to two of my beer tubing colleagues as well. That is Brandon Sewell of Views on Brews and also Thomas McCarthy of Window Beer Reviews, both living over in Ireland, doing some really nice Irish craft beer reviews. So if you want to see Irish stuff reviewed a little bit more regularly than you'll see here, you can go and check their channels out. I'll try to remember to put the links to their channels in the video description below, but do go and check them out, give them a subscribe and show them some love. They're very, very nice guys, of course, and very knowledgeable about beer as well, which is great. But let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Bullhouse Brewing Company before, and hopefully we can add some more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Irish beers that I've reviewed for you, both from the North and from the Republic. And that's being added to very regular at the moment because I am just working my way through the beers that Paul gave me. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Bullhouse Brewing Company, or Bullhouse Brewery once again. So Bullhouse Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, is based in Belfast, and the company was founded by William Main back in 2016. So he has a background in sales, marketing and business development, and his inspiration for craft beer came from travelling in the US and just visiting different breweries. So upon returning to Northern Ireland, he started to homebrew beer for himself in about 2015 and just gradually got more and more into this hobby and started learning more and more, of course. But the brewery were originally based in the former Bullhouse on his family farm, and this is why they chose the name Bullhouse Brewing Company. Pretty obvious. But in September of 2020, they moved to a new premises in the Balmoral area in South Belfast with a 6,000 square foot floor space, and they currently brew around 20 hectolitres, 2,000 litres per week, but they do plan to upgrade their equipment pretty soon to brew 30 hectolitres or 3,000 litres per week, in other words, and that's going to happen very early in 2022 from what I understand. But the current head brewer is James McBride, and he used to work for Boundary Brewery, who are another Northern Irish one that I do recommend you check out, and there are a total of 4 in the brewing team these days who all take turns to brew the beer and create new things, which is great to see. But they plan to open a new bar called Pioneer on Newtonards Road a little bit later on next year as well, in 2022, and they currently export their beers to a few different countries at the moment, and they are planning to look at scaling that up over the next wee while too. Northern Ireland, of course, still has access to the single market, so they're quite lucky in that regard. But as of December 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 40 different kinds of beer, and they are very highly regarded in the Irish craft beer scene, and particularly so in Northern Ireland as well, of course. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Bullhouse Brewery or Bullhouse Brewing Company for the moment. So if you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can also check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on then and see how we get on. So as you can see, the artwork on this one is pretty similar to what we've seen from Bullhouse Brewing Company before. There you can see the Bullhouse Brewing Company symbol there, which looks very nice. Just let the camera focus on that a little bit if I can hold it steady. There we are. There you can see the nice artwork on this one, the big axe, and this one in their numbering system is beer number 58. Although from what I understand, there was a previous version of this beer. I think it might be number 20 something, I forget the exact number, but there has been a prior iteration of this beer. So yeah, I will also point out as well, I noticed that as soon as I set it down on the stool, this beer is actually out of date, unfortunately. There you go. So it's best before the 31st of September 2021. So they're putting a 6-month best before date on this, but I think, you know, sometimes these beers can hold up fairly well for a year. So we'll try it with this one and see how we go. It's an 8%er, so I think it should be all right. But quite a few of the Irish beers we've been reviewing have not been in their prime freshness, and I think it is just what Paul was able to get a hold of for me at the moment. But as an 8% New England or whatever double IPA, I think this one should be pretty alright to try. We'll just need to see how we go. But like I said to you, this one is an 8% double IPA. It has oats and barley malt in the malt base, no mention of wheat. But yeah, we'll just need to see how we go. Big 8% of this. So the Big Axe number 56 in the Bullhouse Brewing Company numbering system. Let's just crack this guy open and see how we get on. Unfortunately, when I was researching this beer, there was no mention of what hops and things were in this one, so we'll just need to see how we go. But let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. But I'll say on the opening, you still get quite a nice little bit of fruitiness out of this one, I have to say. Let's go. We'll just put all of it in the glass for the moment and see how we go. Yeah, it certainly does still look the part, and you know the can, sorry, was a little bit solid with this one, but you're going to get that when the beer is sat in the can for, you know, even 2 or 3 months actually. But yeah, the beer still looks the part, of course. So before the head disappears, you could see that this beer poured with just about a finger of a frothy, I would say, perfect white head. You can see if you zoom into this one, we'll bring the camera up there, it is a perfect white head there. Lovely little small bubbles, but a few bigger ones on top. Does look very, very good. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But I mean, overall, it does look pretty nice. And for what you would expect from a modern IPA, the appearance of this one isn't particularly surprising. Now, if we shine the light through this beer, it's got a lovely, very kind of bright yellow colour. I would compare this to a mango juice, and as you know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I love comparing these IPAs to just different kinds of fruit juices because that's just how it goes. But yeah, lovely, very bright, rich yellow colour, this one. Now remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in are also going to play a role there. But you don't really have to care about those 2 particular variables when it comes to IPAs, of course. They are more relevant for barrel-aged sours and, you know, Berliner Weisses and Goses and things like that. But yeah, the level of haze in this one is not too bad. It's not the soupiest and gloopiest of beer that I've come across, but remember the level of haze in these beers is not really directly linked to the alcohol content, but the things that play a role in that are the yeast that you use, the wheat content and the oat content. This beer of course doesn't have wheat in it, so yeah, it's not surprising that it's not the soupiest and gloopiest. But I have seen ones at 8% ABV that have wheat and oats and things like that in them that have been less hazy than this, so just bear that in mind. But yeah, looks a little bit more like one of these beers that you quite often see termed as an American IPA, which is usually somewhere in between the more caramelly and biscuity West Coast and the more oaty, bready, creamy sort of New England beer. But yeah, nothing really untoward in terms of the appearance of this beer. So I think it's about time for us to have a look at the aroma then. Looks like a nice IPA. So without further ado, we'll jump into the aroma and see what we can get with this one. Yeah, does smell pretty nice actually. Still smells as if it's in pretty good condition. You can smell it's a little bit boozy right enough, but when it's an 8% double IPA, you would kind of expect that, to be honest. But I'll say from the hoppy side of things, it still is in pretty good condition. So I think I spelt a teeny wee bit of that there. We just need to see. But yeah, what I'll say first and foremost is that it comes across with a really nice kind of light bready aroma. You can smell a little bit of a kind of thicker oaty creaminess to the beer as well, but you do have a nice light kind of grassy green component and some juicy fruits. So yeah, that's just a basic overview of the beer. That's a kind of rough nose, but if we look at it a little bit more in depth, we will find that it is just that wee bit more complex. So let's go for it and see what we get from this one. So yeah, backbone of the beer, there's definitely a little bit of that kind of white bready bread crust to this one. So that kind of fresh hedgehog roll sort of thing, there's a lot of that coming out of this, but definitely some nice soft and kind of fluffy white bread there. That'll be from the pale malt, the base malt that's in this one. You're absolutely getting that out of this one. And with this beer, because there's not wheat in it, it does feel just really light and airy. Now the oats are coming out of this beer in quite an abundance, which isn't surprising when there's no wheat there. But the oaty character in these beers is usually an indicator of how old the beer is. So when you first try a New England IPA or an oat forward IPA, whichever subcategory it is, when you have these beers and they're very fresh, the oats are going to be like really kind of creamy and smooth, but and that's both in the flavour and the aroma. But when the beer gets a little bit older, you'll smell the oats kind of drying out a little bit, and they will just give you a wee bit more kind of pungency, but they can also give you quite a little bit of sweetness as well, and I am starting to smell that out of this one. Now you could maybe argue that a 6-month shelf life of this beer is, you could argue it both ways. You could say it's that in terms of freshness, yeah, that's a good advice, but at the same time the beer is going to be drinkable beyond that. That's what I would say, but it's obviously not in its prime condition. But this one, I think it smells all right actually. So yeah, you do get that nice kind of oaty note out of this one. You can smell a bit of the booziness in this beer. One thing I would say is that this beer doesn't have such a big kind of sweetness to it, and quite often you can get that from double IPAs that come in around the 8% mark. Sometimes they will have a little bit of that, you know, Werther's Original caramelly sort of thing to them. But yeah, with this one, you know, you do get a little bit of that, a little bit. I think there might be a little bit of Golden Promise in this one, because there's certainly a wee touch of a McVitie's Digestive Biscuit. There is a wee hint of that kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. But yeah, I don't get such a big, strong caramelly note, which you can sometimes get around the 8% mark, and that covers up the boozy aspect of the beer. But overall, I think this one comes in very nicely, and I'm pretty sure there is a bit of Golden Promise in this beer. There's something about the aroma that's really just ticking those boxes in my head. But on the, I think that's everything we need to say about the malty side of this beer, to be honest. Let's focus on the hoppy part of the aroma. So green component first, as we always do. So yeah, on the hoppy side of things, I do get a little touch of earthiness out of this one. I think it might be one of the softer kind of tropical hops that's in this. Maybe a little bit of Simcoe or a wee bit of Idaho 7 or even Eldorado, something like that. I've got a feeling that's one of those hops in here. But you do get a little touch of earthiness out of this one for sure. There's a little bit of that in there. But of course it takes a back seat to the more pungent parts of the green component. So yeah, on the on that green component, you do get a nice kind of deep floral aromaticity out of this one. And I think that this beer has quite a bright floral aromaticity as well. There is quite a nice big bright floral kind of thing to it. You've certainly got some nice, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of dank quality in there as well. But I think that takes a back seat to the brightness of the floral aromaticity. It's maybe even a tiny little touch spicy actually. But remember, when it comes to these more modern IPAs, they don't have so much in the way of early edition hops. These are the ones that usually give you the bitterness, of course, but they use more late edition hops, which give you a little bit of bitterness, a lot of flavour and aroma, and dry hopping, which is completely flavour and aroma actually. So bear that in mind with these ones. But yeah, definitely a nice little bit of a kind of lighter, zesty, grassy sort of thing to this beer. But yeah, I very much like how this one goes together. So yeah, gets a big thumbs up from me actually. So yeah, green component works. On the fruity side of things, it really leans towards that kind of soft tropical side of the spectrum. So yeah, on the fruity side of things, I do get a wee bit of a kind of passion fruit out of this one, but that's quite minimal. Quite a lot of juicy mango, right enough. There are some dry apricot-y and pineapple-y notes out of this. So I mean, it could be a little bit of galaxy or something like that that's in it as well, because it does have that, you know, mango, passion fruit, pineapple sort of thing. There's definitely a wee bit of that in here. And I'm trying to figure out, I don't think this beer really has any kind of orangey notes to it. I think this one is almost kind of completely tropical actually. So yeah, as I say, a bit of apricot, a bit of pineapple, some mango, and a wee bit of passion fruit for me. But yeah, it's pretty solid actually. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them. But I think it's about time that we try this. So this is the Big Axe, a double IPA coming in at 8% ABV from Bullhouse Brewing Company in Belfast in Northern Ireland. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and thank you to Paul once again for making this review possible. Cheers. Yeah. Now I'm going to say straight away, as I said, when you put 6 months on these beers, yeah, it's a good thing in terms of freshness, but at this stage it is still drinkable and it holds up quite well. The green component I think is a little bit more kind of pungent in this one. It feels a wee bit boozy, but it's still a drinkable IPA this. So yeah, that kind of shows you Bullhouse know what they're doing. But yeah, it's good. Now, as I've told you in previous reviews, for me, there are 6 different factors you need to care about when it comes to New England IPAs. They can be a little bit more kind of they can be a little bit more sort of farmhousey and yeasty. They can be a little bit more rye leaning and grainy. These 2 are not the most common that you'll find in Europe, of course. So you don't have to worry about those so much. But they can be wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, barley malt leaning and bready, or they can have a little bit of a more kind of sweet and brown sugary character to them. You will get a little mix of everything in these. But yeah, when it comes to the West Coasters, of course, they tend to be either kind of biscuity and bready or a little bit more oily and caramelly in a sense. And the American IPA is a style that's kind of lies in between them. And I would definitely say that this one is more of an American IPA. It's got a little bit of the kind of booziness and sweetness, I think, of a kind of West Coaster, but it's and a bit of the bitterness as well, actually. But it does have kind of a lot of the smoothness and things you'd associate with the New England. So this is quite an interesting beer for me. It's one that doesn't really, it doesn't really define itself in any particular, any particular side of those 2 categories. But I like it. I do like this one. So I think it does hit the spot for me. I think generally speaking, it's a very smooth beer. The green component does have a fair little bit of pungency to it. The malty backbone is nice and smooth and quite well balanced. It's got a wee bit more sweetness compared to the aroma than I would have thought as well. And the fruits are quite nice and juicy as well. So overall it is a pretty solid IPA. In fact, I think it does lean a little bit more towards the New England side of things, but there are one or two little West Coasty elements in there. But yeah, it works actually. So I would be curious to try one of their double IPAs or whatever, a little bit fresher. West Coast from these guys, I think, could be very interesting too. But let's break down the beer to be a little bit more detailed, as we always do. So we'll start off with the malt base. So, malty backbone then. So we'll focus on the middle third of your palate. So for me, there is a teeny little bit of bread crust in the base there, but I'd say actually it leans more toward the, it really leans a little bit more toward a kind of smooth, white bready, fluffy white bready character, this one, to be honest with you. There's a lot of the barley malt showing its head in this one, but when there's not wheat there to kind of thicken it out, it's quite interesting because it does feel a little bit more airy, but that flavour is a little bit taller on that middle third of your palate. On top of all of that, of course, you're getting a nice kind of smooth oaty character out of this one. And as I've explained in many reviews, I think we said earlier in this one as well, when it comes to the age of these IPAs, it's the oats that kind of give them away. But the oaty character in this is quite interesting. So sitting on top of that quite nice, airy, bready layer in the middle third of your palate, you can feel like a circle in the middle of your tongue. So you've got that nice oaty character there. So toward the edge of that circle, you get a little bit more of the kind of powdery and sweet character from the oats, but as you move into the dead centre of your palate, you can feel that the oats have a little bit of that kind of wet, porridgey, slight kind of character to them. So you notice that a little bit in this one, and I think you notice that a wee bit more just because the wheat isn't there in this particular beer. But yeah, it does work quite nicely. And on top of that, you do have a wee bit of sweetness coming out of this one, and that's not really a surprise when you consider the fact that this is 8% ABV, and I'm still pretty sure there's a bit of golden promise in this, but we'll come back to that in a second. So, on top of that kind of oaty circle that I was talking about, you do get a smaller circle in the middle of your palate there, where you can feel there is a bit of that Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing there. And if you go to the dead centre of your palate, you will get a little bit of a straight up boozy caramel out of this one, but that's quite minimal. But as you move out from that smaller circle on the oaty side of things, you will get a little bit of that McVitie's digestive biscuity character out of this beer. And for me, that is golden promise. I'm pretty certain that that's the golden promise in this beer, showing its head. But it works, and it does give the beer a nice little edge for sure. But I think that's everything that we really need to say about the I think that is everything we need to say about the kind of middle third of your palate with this one. So we'll focus on the back third of your palate then. The border region between between middle third and back third of your palate, again, there's a little bit of a kind of bready build up there, a wee touch of bread crust. Then the base of that back third of your palate, there's a wee bit more of that kind of bread crusty, grainy sort of thing. Kind of sitting on top of that, you get the white bready character again, and it's quite airy, but it does feel a little bit more dense on the back third of your palate, and it's almost a little touch more grainy too, so you can feel that. Then I think that on top of that, you've got the yeasty notes out of this one. So the yeasty character for me, it has a little bit more of a kind of wholemeal, brown bready character to it. It feels a bit more dense, and there is just a little bit of that grainy, slightly peppery spice coming out of this one. So yeah, the yeasty character in this beer is quite interesting. But yeah, slightly more bread crusty grain, a bit of a thicker and slightly more grainy bready layer out of this one. And then on top of all of that, you have the yeasty, the slightly yeasty, peppery kind of character. So yeah, the way that all goes together in this beer, I think, is very nice. But when you start on the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour. This is a little bit taller, and as you move, as you come further forward, the flavour just condenses down a wee bit. And as you go into the middle third of your palate, and those flavours are just a wee bit more kind of squashed together. So yeah, I think it works. I do think it works really nicely. But yeah, malty side of this one, without the wheat, it does feel a bit different, but it certainly works. We can't really knock the beer in that way, but I will say the malty side of this one does feel just that little bit different. But it doesn't feel as if it lacks anything. It just makes the beer feel a little bit more like an American IPA rather than a full New England. If it had the wheat in there to thicken out, I think this beer really would be all the way toward the New England spectrum rather than sitting in the middle a little bit. But let's focus on the hoppy side of this beer then. So, the back corners of your palate then, and the green component. So there's certainly a wee tiny touch of earthiness to this one, but not overly much. As you come further forward, it gets a little bit herbal, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of your palate, it's a little bit more floral and aromatic. And the beer, in fairness, does have a wee bit of an almost danky pine needly type thing to this. So I would be really curious to know what hops are in this one. I always used to like playing Guess the Hops with these beers, but it's getting increasingly more difficult these days just because of the sheer number of hops that are out there. But round the front curve of the palate, this one, you can feel it's got a nice little bit of a lighter grassy sort of thing to it, but the grassiness has a fair little bit of zesty character to it as well. And again, I can appreciate how that comes out of this one. But yeah, we'll focus on the front third of your palate then. We've covered everything we need to say about the green component. So, border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit more of a bready build up, a wee bit of a bread crusty sort of thing. Then the base of that front third of your palate, it's got a little bit more bread crust and a smooth white bready note to it as well. So yeah, I think that I do think that comes out quite nicely. But yeah, definitely more of a white bread, and the bread crust I think comes out a little bit more the further you go into the aftertaste. On top of all of that though, you have that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's focus on that side of things then. But yeah, I really would be curious to know what hop it is in this one. I really couldn't tell you if it's. It could just be a bit of Citra, but I wouldn't be surprised if this one's Galaxy actually. I think it's got a little bit more pungency to it. But the fruity characters then will just work their way forward at the back of that front third of your palate. You do get a bit of a kind of more pungenty passion fruit note out of this one. But as you move further forward, you do get a little bit of that typical kind of juicy mango note there. And as you reach the middle of your palate, there's a little bit of that dried apricot and pineapple-y quality. And as you go into the front half of that front third of your palate, it remains tropical. So that makes me think, could this just be like a Galaxy Citra or something like that? I don't find that this beer has really anything in the way of an orangey or character like that. But as you reach the kind of front tip of your palate, it does have a wee bit of an almost limey character. But the limey character I don't think is prominent enough to be like Motueka or Equinaut, you know, a predominantly limey hop. I think it could be just a bit of Citra and, you know, maybe a little bit of like El Dorado or Idaho 7 or a bit of Galaxy that's in this, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Galaxy and Citra or just Galaxy on its own and something else. That would be, you know, it's something along these lines that's coming out in this beer. But whatever it is, it does work. But yeah, that front half of the front third of your palate, it is, you know, the dried apricot-y sort of notes. They just push their way forward on that. Then you get a wee bit of the kind of more limey character at the very front tip of the tongue. So yeah, I really like how this one goes together actually. So in that regard, it gets a big thumbs up from me. But yeah, this one, I think this is an interesting beer for sure, and it's slightly different from a number of the other IPAs we've had in recent times, but still well done. It definitely is well done, and I think stylistically it is more like one of those American IPAs rather than being New England or West Coast. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. It straddles the line a little bit. But yeah, and even at 8 months, 8 months old, because we're just at the very beginning of December, it holds up well, so I like it. for sure. But let's round off the review with the mouthfeel of this one then. So, mouthfeel wise, I would say that this beer is kind of mid-bodied. It's actually quite light-bodied for a double IPA. I think that's fair to say. It does feel quite nice and clean. The Irish, of course, have got very good water over there, just as we have in Scotland, so it does feel quite nice and clean. There's a bit of slickness there. Carbonation's very, very smooth. But yeah, everything goes together pretty nicely in that way, I have to say. In terms of hoppy bitterness and things, yeah, in terms of hoppy bitterness, I think this beer, it has, you know, it has a little bit more bitterness to it. I think this one could be about 40-ish IBUs, and it's not uncommon to put the IBU of the beer up a little bit when it goes into the double territory, to be honest with you. So I think this could be 40, maybe 50 IBUs, an absolute push. The malt base in this one has a little bit of lightness to it, a little bit of graininess, and it's also got a wee bit of smoothness and sweetness later on as well. And the fruits for me have a little bit of dryness to them, but they're still quite oily, and it's really leaning towards that tropical end of the spectrum. But yeah, a very nice beer, this one, actually. And once again, I'm impressed with the quality of stuff coming out from Bullhouse, but not surprised. So yeah, big thumbs up to Bullhouse Brewing Company for this one once again. Quite a boozy beer, this, but I'm glad I'm going to share the other half of this with my dad for sure, because I can feel it going to my head a little bit. I must have been hungry before I filmed this review. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So yeah, the Big Axe, the second iteration, of course, because remember there was another one in the 20s. But yeah, the number 56 from Bullhouse Brewing Company in the Balmoral area in southern Belfast. Definitely a brewery I'm going to keep my eye on over the next little while. So I think we need to try a lager and a darker beer from these guys over the next little bit. But yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Bullhouse Brewing Company, and we will return to these guys at some point fairly soon, and you will see some more Irish reviews coming up as well. But yeah, thanks for watching. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys on the next one. The Big Axe Double IPA, 8% ABV from Bullhouse Brewing Company in southern Belfast in Northern Ireland. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.